Cayosoft Administrator is the best way to manage the hybrid Microsoft enterprise. Let's sign into the web portal and create a new user. After I've signed into the web portal with either my Active Directory credentials or my Azure Active Directory credentials, I will see a list of administrative units on the left-hand side. If you're familiar with Active Directory, you can think of these as virtual OUs. Each administrative unit has a series of queries. Each query represents a type of object or a condition or state of an object. So for example, here, if I want to work with AD users, I simply select AD users. But if I wanted to unlock user accounts, I could simply select AD users that are in the locked out state. Once I've selected the administrative unit and the type of object I'd like to work with, the next thing I'm presented with is a search window in the center. And then on the right-hand side, I have a list of commands. To search for a user, I simply enter partial name and click search. And in a very short amount of time, the objects that match that search are returned. We use a Microsoft built-in search if we're searching Active Directory, or a built-in search that is a part of the Azure Active Directory environment if you're managing Office 365 alone. Next, I'm going to choose one of the commands that I've been delegated. In this case, I am a global administrator, so I have access to all of the commands. I'll simply click New User and wait for the dialog box to appear. In this case, it's already predetermined where the user will be created. This is done through configuration, and so all I need to do is provide some portion of the name. So I've now entered Sally Walters, and what you'll see is that the full name, display name, username, which is the user principal name, and the SAM account name for Active Directory are all automatically generated. When I first installed the solution, I was asked to provide details through an interview process. The details about my naming conventions were some of the questions that were asked, and that's how the system knew to use those particular formats. Across the bottom, I can choose the type of mailbox this particular user gets. It can be an on-premise Exchange mailbox or a remote Exchange mailbox. If I am not running Exchange on-premise, which is not required for Cayosoft Administrator, these buttons get reconfigured to say no mailbox or Office 365 mailbox. When I'm in Exchange remote hybrid mode, I actually will need to create several objects. Not only will I create the user in Active Directory, I will also need to call Exchange on-premise, create a remote mailbox with the appropriate routing information, and then I'll need to call Office 365, create a user, assign a license, and initialize the mailbox process. In this case, all of that's done in the background for me. All I need to do is choose remote mailbox. If I continued at this point, a default license is assigned. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and assign a license. Click Next, and now I'm asked for the password. Typically, we would auto-generate a password so the user would not have to do anything. I want a default password for my demonstrations so that I can log into the mailbox later. And then the settings on the Active Directory account are maintained through a series of checkboxes. The idea here, I can set these any which way I'd like, so that, for example, user cannot change password may be a default. If I want it to be default, the checkbox would be enabled here. I can also make these read-only so that the users cannot change them or hide them entirely. I've exposed an extra little feature of the tool. It will track tickets and embed that into the change history the product maintains. So if I know I have a service desk ticket, I can enter it, and it will now be tracked as part of the change process. And I also have a policy, a custom policy set up to generate a description for the user so that I know who created it and when and according to what ticket. The last step, I'm allowed to provide some additional details about the user. So maybe this user is an engineer, so I enter the title. If you don't want your users, your help desk, or your day-to-day admins entering details because of potential spelling mistakes or other errors, you can actually assign a custom policy that will allow this to become a drop-down list and then ensure that the data integrity is maintained. Additional attributes can be added at the bottom so that you can customize this to your needs. So if you wanted employee ID, which is a custom field I've entered here, you may also want something like employee type. Next, I'll click Create. And once the dialog box disappears, I'm free to perform other tasks. So at the top right, I have activities. It tells me that it's still completing the tasks that I need to have done in the hybrid mode. So I'm going to go ahead and perform another task. Here I'll go ahead and reset Albert Einstein's password. At the top right, as these tasks are completed, you'll see a little activity notice, little green light shows up to tell me that they've been done. And during this session, I can go back and review these for accuracy. So the new user creation process created an on-premise user in Active Directory called Sally Walters, created the remote mailbox, assigned routing information, created the Office 365 account, enforced the license, and added them to a group. I'm not sure if this group is on-premise or in cloud, but either is supported. Because I'm performing hybrid tasks, the Active Directory user is immediately available. And because of our advanced technology, the account in Office 365 or Azure Active Directory is also immediately available. There may be some delay while the mailbox itself is created in Exchange Online. This is typically less than 2 or 3 minutes, so we just have to wait to go and look at the mailbox details. If I come over and click the mailbox option, it will retrieve the necessary data to show me this hybrid user's view, a unified view of the attributes from on-premise and cloud that are required to manage the mailbox settings. So in this case, I'm looking at Sally Walters. I see that at the top, and it tells me that this is certainly a remote mailbox, which indicates that it has an on-premise component and a cloud component. With a hybrid on-premise cloud mailbox such as this, I must manage the SMTP addresses according to the rules Microsoft implements on-premise, but the usage information, features, delivery restrictions, the rest of the tabs across the top are all derived and set on the mailbox in Exchange Online. So I have one view of both Active Directory details and the necessary details on the mailbox in the cloud so that I have a single point of management for all of these hybrid operations.